All right. So did from the last time we kind of knocked off this series, we were obviously talking about David. We got kind of towards the end there of what happens with David and Goliath. Did anybody not get a chance to check that out? It's okay if you didn't, no worries. If you weren't here, that is. I doubt it. Somebody missed it. Too easy. I'm coming through okay. All right. You guys laugh when I say snarky comments then. All right. That way I can tell if your faces are moving. So what we're going to do is the reason I ask is because there's a couple things, if we remember, that happened in there that were uniquely interesting. And some of those were that obviously David had practiced everything that he had before this. It also was a good reminder that, a prophet is only without honor in their own country, right? And as he stands there and, Saul has seen him, he can't believe it. His brothers can't believe it. Nobody can believe it. In fact, we finished filming some for that documentary yesterday, and I think the direction they're going to take is really neat. It's kind of like really a story of Slade, and in it, Slade and I were just talking, and I was telling him the same thing. Something that we went over is, if, as Jesus says, that you're trying to be loved by the culture, then you're going to be at opposition to God, right? It doesn't mean that you can't be civil. It doesn't mean, like Paul says, that you're not trying to be all things to all men, right? It doesn't mean that you're not trying to, as Paul says, be at peace with all men in as much as it is capable of you. But it does mean that if you hold a certain value set, regardless, at times you'll be hated for that because the dark hates the light. And what we talked about yesterday was how, you know, why was the Samaritan in the Good Samaritan story willing to help the Jew? And it's kind of an interesting thing. It's one that, is not so often thought of. But so if we remember in the Good Samaritan story, and this is kind of going to go all the way back to how David sees his warrior like status, is the person that falls on the road is a Jew, and he's basically beaten. And I don't know if his situation there naked would have made him ceremonially unclean. Bill, do you know?
No, I don't think it would have.
I don't think so either.
I mean, just getting beat up doesn't make you unclean.
Right. But he's definitely a vagrant of society at that point, right? So it's like, is the guy that's walking up, seeing him looking beat up, he's naked, are they like, oh, this is probably an upstanding citizen that I should help out? No, there's just nothing in it for them, right? And not only that, that entire culture was very face oriented, right? It was very, how am I perceived? And we see this because they have the tassels and they have the robes and they want to sit at the head of the table, and everything is status in that culture. Well, because of that desire for high status, they're walking up and somebody's on the ground. He walks by, the priest walks by, the Levite walks by. But if we remember, obviously the story is named after this. Who does help him? Who helps him?
The Good Samaritan.
The Good Samaritan. And what is characteristically different about the Samaritan versus the first two guys? I see your mic off, Alex. I'll wait.
He's he's not a Jew, is he?
That's it. That's it. It's that fucking simple. He's
Yeah.
not a Jew. And why is that important? Well, a man was walking from Jerusalem to Jericho. He's in Israel. He's in Judea at the time, right? The man that helps him is not a Jew. He's a foreign person, not liked by any of the people around him already, in their land, on their paths, and therefore doesn't give a shit how he's perceived for helping this guy on the ground, right? He goes and does the uncommon there and probably can't believe that people say that they care about each other and yet walk right by this guy of their own culture, right? And so all that to say that if we're going to be able to be a good Samaritan, we have to have a mindset that I don't care what the rest of society thinks about my actions, because shame is the number one motivator when it comes to what people will and will not do in this world. It's the number one fear is not public speaking. What's the number one fear? Messing up while I'm public speaking, right? It's not the speaking. It's the apprehension around the failure of speaking, because then I will be shamed because I'll be perceived poorly by my peers. And so I have to free myself from some of that. And I bring all that up to say, when David walks up and says, what's happening here? And there's all these guys kind of murmuring and talking, the way he presents himself is one in which that he does not care what the rest of that culture thinks about him. And at the same time, he's strategically intelligent enough to take the head of Goliath with him. So there is this paradoxical approach that we have to have as believers in a secular world, that I don't care what the individual thinks about me, but I'm going to make sure that at times I do actions that the collective will see, right? And so if I am going to work and Todd doesn't like me because I'm going to live with integrity or whatever that may look like, cool, I don't care. But at the same time, I do want to be a high performer so the collective respects me, so that I have the opportunity to share the gospel in a secular, with secular success and truth. So I don't just look like a hypocrite and a phony, right? So that is what we're going to see with David. So that's kind of why we bring that up, to go through that piece. So 1 Samuel, I'm clicking my button here to get where I left off. Israel demands king, Saul search, Saul's prophets, Ammonites addresses, war with the Philistines, Jonathan's victory, Saul's disobedience. Is it all the way in 2 Samuel? No. Okay, here we go. All right. We're 2 Samuel 8 or 1 Samuel 18. If you guys want to, I'll just blue letter. I'll pull this up on the screen for us. Boom, we're there. All right, so I think I'm on the right spot. Let me double check. Yep, I'm your servant, Jesse the Bethlehemite. All right, here we go. Does somebody have opened a Bible and they want to just read from 18:1 to 18:9? Alex, you look like the guy for the job. Alex literally disappeared on camera when I said it. All right, Lucas, come on.
Cool. As soon as he had finished speaking
I
to
was like,
Saul, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robes that was on him, and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul sent him over to the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all people, and also in the sight of Saul's servant. As they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they celebrated. Saul had struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, "They have ascribed to David 10,000, and to me have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom?" And Saul eyed David from that day on.
Yeah, with suspicion, right? So a couple things happen here. We want to try to remember this has to be when it comes to David, the weirdest thing for a non-warrior-esque man to understand, because later it's going to say that they were closer than the love of a woman, right? A couple things context wise. Do we know who's older, David or Jonathan? Do we remember? What we think?
I don't remember, but I'm guessing Jonathan's older.
Yeah, for sure. Jonathan's already been off to battle with Saul multiple. He has an armor bearer. He's the one who, he has a very similar thought process to David, right? He at one point is off. It's just him and his armor bearer. They're looking up, and there's like a band of guys up there. And Jonathan also is a strong believer and says, hey, you see those guys? And his armor bearer's like, what should we do? And he goes, if they call out to us, then the Lord's delivered us. We're going to crawl up there and smoke these dudes. If they don't, then he hasn't. And so they're kind of in proximity and like, hey, Israelite, why don't you come on up here? And he's like, bet. So they crawl up the side of this mountain, kill all these dudes. That takes some bravado, right? That takes a very aggressive spirit to be able to go do something like that. And so imagine for him, he's been surrounded by his father who, you don't get to choose your family. I lucked out, but Jonathan didn't. And Jonathan's father's a coward, and he knows he's a coward. And so he's going to have a level of respect, but he knows his dad's a coward. And then all of a sudden comes this young man who just fought. And you better believe that Jonathan was there. Jonathan saw what he did. He saw him walk back with the head of this Philistine, right? He sees this, and he's a young man. And naturally, maybe the picture of this is similar to like Obi-Wan and Anakin. There is like this adopting of who he is, right? The kid, for all intents and purposes, has been more or less even ostracized by his own father. David has. So he's pretty unloved by most relationships. He's the eighth son, thrown out in the field. He's basically gets talked trash to by his brothers all the time. And yet still he has this uncommon spirit because he spent so much time shepherding, taking care of God, looking under the stars, searching the same way Abraham does. And so he has this unconquerable spirit. Jonathan sees that. Jonathan's much older at this point, rightfully so, in line for the kingdom. But remember when we were talking about the tribal hierarchy? Most likely Jonathan is a knight, right? Like a apex knight, a powerful guy. He probably, when he sees David, can see something very uncommon. And there's something that a ultra high level knight understands when they see that. And that's what happens with Jonathan here, is he sees that and knows that this kid has greatness, adopts him under as like, I will be his mentor, but ultimately knows that he will become the mentor to Jonathan at some point, and that's what happens, realistically. Like Bill adopted me as a mentee, 10 years ago, more than that now, 15 years ago. Yeah. And I imagine Bill had a similar view of me. He's like, okay, this unpolished product is going to be exceptional if he decides to walk with God. And Bill literally, it's when we first opened a second gym, and I'd have to drive up to Crestview, about 40 minutes up there, 40 minutes back. Bill would just come get in the car with me and ride with me up there and go up, and he just hang out all day and come back.
Nobody made Jacoby come though.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. he knew Jacoby,
He was the bridge.
he was the bridge. I was not about to listen to just another Christian guy. It's like, hey, have you heard of Jesus? And I'm like, hey, have you heard get the fuck away from me? Like that was my mindset, because I didn't have a problem with Jesus. I just had a problem with people telling me about Jesus, because those people were soft hypocrites. And instead what he did was he just brought 6'2", 230-pound black fullback in to played college ball, looked like a warrior. And I'll never forget Jacoby. I was driving out on 38. If you're not from here, that doesn't make any reference. Actually, it was old 98. I was coming around this bend, heading toward the crab trap, and I was talking to him on the phone. He's like, hey man, you want to come to this Bible study with me? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. And he's like, why is this? If you know Jacoby, he's got like an infectious laugh. So he starts laughing. And he's like, I'm like, dude, I do not like Christians. And he's like, he laughs and he goes, yeah, man, me neither. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, this is not what you think it is. And I was like, all right. So I show up, I hang out, Bill's there. I'd never forget, my wife had wanted me to go to a church, and I would go to church every now and then with her just because I loved her. And Bill was so radically different. I love Bill. Bill is absolutely repellent to every female that grew up in a Christian church for the first 3 visits. And then after that, they're like, oh no, this guy is who he says he is. And everybody else is just living a talk. Right. And so my wife was the same way. We showed up, we left. She's like, I don't think that's for me. And then I remember the following week we came back with like this epic argument. I drove around the block mad. I was like, fine. I like driving off, and I'm like, fuck that. So I just circled back in. Bill, it's like a racetrack. I came back in. I go, we can sit your ass in the car, but I'm going inside. Right. And so she came inside, and 15 years later, it was one of the best things spiritually that ever happened. But, Bill did the same thing for me, and brought me forward. And that's what happens with Jonathan here with David, is he sees something here. And because of that, he shows this young man his approval by giving him his stuff. Right. So there is this reciprocity happening here of he's doing for David what nobody's ever done, which is providing from his own, caring for him in a different kind of way. And because of David's approach to things, Jonathan has a high level of respect. And what does that turn into? Well, as they continue, as we see here, they go off to battle. And this is kind of funny because, good, Nate's on here too. So Nate, like when you guys were, Nate Orr there, when you guys were at selection, so Nate is in the unit. He's newer in the unit. He is not new to doing tactical stuff. Nate, how long have you been a trooper now?
16.
Yeah, so 16 years. And he's at the highest level you can be trooper in Florida. He's on what's called special response team. They're fucking studs. They're the SWAT team they do high risk warrants. They're hunting people down. They're not sitting out on the road catching people speeding. Not that they're above it, but it's just not their mission set. And so he does all these amazing things. He goes to our selection, does with this at selection. When you guys were doing like search and rescue stuff, who was doing most of the work, your team leader or the team?
The
team. And so this is the thing that's interesting for Saul, is like Saul should not have expected to kill 10,000s. He's not the point man. He's not the actions on guy. The fact that he killed anybody is already impressive, because it means Saul is going to fight, right? So he's going off to war and he's fighting. However, like your flanking positions and all those, like when I go into an operation, I'm a legit ground force commander. I'm not sitting in a talk. I go out with the team, but my team is executing most of the actions on, right? If it's a smaller setup, then maybe me. But if I'm getting, if I get injured or something in that situation, that changes the command and control drastically. So what happens is some of your most dangerous guys are on the tip of that spear that are going to do something, right? Like when we went on all the last hurricanes, we would end up in small teams enough where I would be actions on doing stuff. But generally speaking, that's not a good tactic for a commander in that position. The right thing to do is you let your dogs go do work. And so they go off to war. When they come back, what should happen with a humble leader here is he's excited that one of his men has created this type of glory. Like for me, when my guys do amazing stuff, I see that as an extension of me. And I don't care if my name is mentioned in iota. I want to see my guys rise. And Saul doesn't see that here, right? David is going to realize that along the way. And how do we know that? Because who does David later surround himself with versus Saul? What do you guys got? Do you remember?
The mighty men, the 30.
Yeah. He surrounds himself with literally a band of savages that all have insane backgrounds, right? Like if you had to choose one person, one thing to fight, would you rather fight a huge guy or a lion? What are we going with?
I think I'd pick a huge guy over a lion.
I think that that would be a wise decision, right? The reaction time, the timing, the speed, the movement, the uncommon approach, the multitude of weapons. Like a lion is not like another big animal. That is a hunting animal. It is prepared to fight, especially in the case of Benaiah that goes down into a pit, right? Into a lion den to fight a lion. You back an animal into any corner, you better expect to fight. And that's what happens with Benaiah. So David surrounds himself with men who have reputations that are equal to his. Saul gets very jammed up by that. And so what happens next after this is he creates this large suspicion, and Saul knows what he knows, that the kingdom has been taken from him. This is what Samuel already told him. So he for sure is going to be on the look forever and always for who is that is going to take the kingdom. And he's right. It's going to be David. So as we press on, so now it came about the next day that an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved in his midst of the house. And while David was playing with his hand as usual, and a spear was in Saul's hand, then Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will strike David to the wall, but David escaped from his presence twice. Twice? Run that back. What did that just say? Somebody tell me what that said.
It said twice. He attempted to do it 2 times.
Dose spear, right? So check this out. This is kind of crazy. Remember what happens is this tormenting spirit comes upon Saul when David plays a harp, just like usual. That lessens that. In that lessening of the torment, he decides to pick up a spear and try to kill the guy who's lessening that torment. That is a different level of selfishness. Like, put that in context. The person who is alleviating your pain, you're trying to kill. He would rather be in tormenting pain than lose his kingdom. That's the level of selfishness that's going through Saul's head here, right? Now, Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had left Saul. Saul removed him from his presence and appointed him as a commander of 1,000. And he went out and came before the people. David was acting wisely in all his ways, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw that he was very successful, he was afraid of him. And I think this is probably a better translation, that he was acting very wisely. He was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for he would go out and return before them. Then Saul said to David, here is my older daughter, Merab. I will give to you as a wife. Only be a valiant man for me and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, my hand shall not be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him. And this is, men, we have to pay attention to what Saul is doing here. Saul is systematically trying to have David killed. And if we're not careful, we'll think that I am God's only child. We will think that I am the most special, I am the most important, and therefore I can forsake all others for the outcome that's most necessary to take care of my self-interest. What you got, Lucas?
Yeah, I just think it's interesting here because later David does almost a similar thing in putting,
Yes,
drawing a blank on his name, but putting him at the front lines to have him killed, have somebody else fight his battle, right? So
that is exactly right. And that is probably why it's such a big deal. I know it's a big deal to kill your boy anyways, like don't get me wrong, but this is also not 2025. This is a different world. The fact that David firsthand experienced this and then does the same evil, that's a real problem for God, right? But David said to Saul, who am I and who is my family or my father's family in Israel that I should be king or the king's son-in-law? So it came about the time that Merab, Saul's daughter, was to be given to David, and she was given instead to Adriel, the Meholathite as a wife. Now, Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. When they informed Saul this thing was pleasing to him in his sight, pleasing in his sight. For Saul thought, I will give her to him so that she may become a trap for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore, Saul said to David for a second time, you may become my son-in-law today. Hold on. What's happening here? There's some context we need to read from this. Why would Saul say that? Why would Saul say a trap for him? Why does Michal love David? What's happening? Somebody give me some guesses. Remember, we came to be wrong, so throw some stuff out. What you got, Hank? What do you think? Hank's loading some guns right now.
I did just get to the range, yeah. I was thinking that maybe she was promised to a Philistine or something, and that would piss them off, but I'm not quite sure.
That's not a bad guess. It's not a bad guess. Contextually, I'm not sure that it plays out, but that's a damn good assumption. She sees him. She knows who David is. This is Jonathan's sister, of course, right? She's watching him. She has an admiration for him. She's, I believe, the younger sister. We'll see in a second. But what happens is she must have some kind of, go ahead, Alex.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, she has like a taking to him. She's like, oh, I like him. And then Saul goes like, cool. If I think that this David might like you, I'll make it so enticing to him that I'm gonna make him go do something crazy, and then again he'll die just because like a man will do a crazy thing for the love of a woman.
100%, right? So he wasn't willing to go do it for the first daughter. He literally says, how should I even be your son-in-law? That's crazy. And that's his way, by the way, very wisely, of not going to go do what Saul told him to do. Then comes along a daughter that loved David, and presumably he has a very high desire for her. A trap for him, I think, is to be read as he will be willing to go do this. I also think, and obviously I've read the subsequent chapters, I think she is a very strong-willed woman, right? I think she's the daughter that will be a pain in the butt, right? I think that easily this could be my wife. My wife has a very strong spirit. And if you're not prepared for that, good luck, buddy. That's what is happening here. So he goes off. Next, it says, then Saul commands his servant, speak to David in secret, saying, behold, the king delights in you, and all his servants love you. Now then become the king's son-in-law. So again, Saul is very shrewd. You got to give him credit. He sends him secretly to kind of spread this word to David. So Saul's servant spoke these words to David, but David said, it is trivial in your sight to become the king's son-in-law, since I am only a poor man, is it, and insignificant. Saul's servants reported to him, these are the words David spoke. That's a humility. he says back to the servants who are sent in secret, he's like, do you think that it's not a big deal for me to be the son of the king, right? Son-in-law of the king. Then Saul said, this is what you shall say to David. The king does not desire any dowry except 100 foreskins of the Philistines to take vengeance upon the king's enemies. So why was David saying, do you think that it's inconsequential? It's not a big deal. David has nothing to offer, right? There has to be a dowry in this time. What's a dowry?
The foreskins.
Yeah. In this case, it was. What would it normally be?
A great amount of wealth.
And why is that? Think about that in context. We don't do dowries in our society, but we probably should. So why is there a dowry here? What does that mean?
My initial thought is when you I think a while back we talked about the oil that was poured on Jesus's feet, but I think that was on the family's side to the daughter, right? On the other side, it would just be showing like, hey, I'm committed and what I'm getting is of value, so I'm going to provide value.
Yeah, exactly. And in order to provide value, you have to have some secular success. So if you're going to take on the daughter of another man as your wife, then you have to prove that you are a provider, right? That's a pretty high standard. And it's one in which helps ensure that your daughter will be taken care of. Except this is a princess. So he's like, do you think it's a small deal? Like, I can't provide to the king a level of substance to prove that I'm worthy to take care of her, like her or not. And so what happens is they go back and he goes, well, in this case, what he wants you to prove you can provide is that you are an uncommon warrior. He wants a protection provided, not a finance provided. And so when his servants told David these words, it pleased David to become the king's son-in-law. You see, he sees now David goes, oh, well, go kill 1,000 guys. I can do that, right? I love his approach. He's like, I don't know nothing about stocks, but if you want me to go smoke 1,000 guys and cut their junk off, like, I got you, bro. So before the time had expired, what's that mean? Again, there's a standard here for this dowry. Here's the price. Can you produce the price? And you have this long to do it. This is great. Like, again, we don't do this in our society, for a host of reasons, but I don't hate it. David set out and went, and he and his men fatally struck 200 men among the Philistines. Was it 100 foreskins? It's 100 at first. Yeah. Yeah. You know what foreskin is? No.
Who are you talking to?
My daughter. Then David brought their foreskins. It's basically for people that grew up in this time, it's like skin around the end of their penis. And so he's like, go cut off the extra skin. Yeah, pretty gangster. David brought their foreskins and they presented all 200 of them to the king. How many?
Double.
Called for?
Yeah, he went above and beyond. They called for 100. He brought 200.
Exactly. Right. And so that the king might become, or so that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter Michal as his wife. When Saul saw and realized that the Lord was with David and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, then Saul was even more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy continually. Then the commanders of the Philistines went to battle, and it happened as often as they went out, David was more successful than all the servants of Saul. So his name was held in high esteem. This is what we were talking about before. You see, he's not, you could say he's trying to get Saul's approval, but he clearly was not, because he doesn't do it for Merab or Merab, however you say the first woman, right? He does do it for Michal, the second. So he's doing it because he wants the daughter, not because he wants Saul's approval, right? He also brings back 200 because imagine if he brings 100 and Saul wordsmiths them into 200. I said 200. Why is David's very wise? It's standing above reproach in your actions. What you got, Lucas?
Just question. When do you think it shifts for Saul? Like initially, he seems to be like more jealous or like ego driven towards David, like it's a prideful thing. But then as we're reading down further, this is the second time that it's mentioned, 29, it says even more afraid. And then further up, like it changes to fear at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And
What,
honestly, man, I
do you
think
think
that's,
that is?
yeah, I think it's a great observation. And I think the basis of envy and everything else, I think is just fear. Because I think what envy is my inadequacies can never achieve this. And therefore I hate those that have. Right. So like when I find myself being jealous of somebody, well, why am I jealous? Would I be jealous if I had the same? No. So why am I jealous? I'm jealous because I'm afraid that I'm too inadequate to reach that outcome. Therefore, it's easier to hate them, this antipathy we talked about before, than it is to challenge my own actions, challenge my own thought, my own character. Right. And so when he sees somebody rising to a level that he thinks is unobtainable for himself, he's going to be afraid of that. Right. Now, Saul told his son Jonathan and all his servants to put David to death. Right. So he gives his daughter away. He sees this great name for him. And then he tells all of them, hey, get that guy killed. This is a good leadership perspective here that we want to pay attention to. Men that see another man living humbly with greatness, they're not going to buy into that leadership. Most people, when they think about leadership, they think from authority, right? Not you guys, I'm just saying in the world. They think I'm in charge, therefore. You have to think from an inspirational style of leadership. Like I never want somebody that is supposed to be under my command, business, household, unit, whatever it is, to do something because I told them to do it. And they think if they don't, there will be a recourse for that. You want to lead in a way that says, I'm excited to do it because I trust this guy. And he is breaking that trust by asking them to do something that they know is not okay. And so what we see is, but Jonathan, Saul's son, greatly delighted in David. So Jonathan informed David, saying, my father Saul is seeking to put you to death. Now then, please hide, or now then, please be on your guard in the morning and stay in a hiding place and conceal yourself. And as for me, I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are hiding, and I will speak with my father about you. And whatever I see, I will tell you. If Saul said, let's have David put to death, why does Jonathan say, go hide in the field and I'll see what Saul had to say? What does that tell us? This might be hard to pick up, so it's okay if you don't pick it up. What does that tell us about Saul? What's the guess?
I don't think Saul is operating off of much of a plan. He's just like reacting to situations as they come. Um, so he seems to be a little out of control,
Yeah.
and losing control, more control. So
Yeah. What you got, Dad?
Would it be like he's not leading his own son, with love and inspiration to follow him,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
his son is wanting to follow someone that he does believe in?
That's right. And to both of y'all's points, Saul, very reactionary. He will give commands and override those commands with other commands. His word doesn't carry weight on what will happen. If Saul says, all right, we're going to go to city X, everybody knows along the way to city X, we might get diverted to Y. We might come back. We might do something else. It's his word when he speaks doesn't carry much weight because he's reactionary out of fear. And this is very much what happens with a fear-based leader is you can't really trust what they have to say. So the reason that David tells him to hide in the field is that might have just been a one-off that Saul said that. Saul said, we're going to have him killed. Well, the next morning he might be like, listen, the Philistines, something happened. Go get David. We need to go battle these guys, right? He needs to be sure that this is exactly what Saul is actually intending, because Saul has a very fluent command pattern. So he goes out and he hides. And Jonathan spoke well of David to his father, Saul, and said to him, may the king not sin against his servant David, since he's not sinned against you, since his deeds have been very beneficial to you. For he took his life in his hand and struck the Philistines. And the Lord brought about a great victory for all of Israel. And you saw it and rejoiced. Why then would you sin against an innocent blood by putting David to death for no reason? Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul vowed, as the Lord lives, David shall not be put to death. Right? So already you're seeing that there's a very fluent thought process for Saul. Then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. Kind of nuts, right? And we're going to see this kind of similar situation play out down the line. Again, before Jonathan sends Saul off into hiding, David, and before David is willing to go off into hiding, let's vet this out. This, by the way, is a very good life tactic. So often when things are uncomfortable, people want to remove themselves from the comfort to get a certainty. So most people in David's shoes would have went, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to go. But I would encourage you, men, to allow yourself to live in an uncertainty on things at times. My wife, plenty of times, my friends, family, whatever, have been like, what do you think is going to happen? And I go, I don't know. We'll see. Right. And when it's clear, then I'll decide. But until then, I'm just going to sit here and remain in this uncertain situation, and let's see how it plays out. I don't remember who I first heard say this, but I think it's the most accurate way to view it. And that is, it's not something until it's something. Even if it looks like something's building, it's not something until it's something. And that's the mindset he has here. Maybe it's something, but until I know it's something, I'm just going to let it be uncomfortable. That's very hard for most people to handle. So I would just encourage you, like, if I am out on a battlefield and I see a guy 500 meters away and he's walking in my direction, he's not laying down in a sniper position or whatever, I'm going to be alert to that. But I'm not going to shoot at that guy yet until I know something is something, right? And most people be like, well, what if he shoots at you? Well, I can see him walking, right? So of course it's factually dependent, but it's not something until it's something. Just let it be uncomfortable. I don't know. We'll wait and see. Well, what are you going to do? I don't know. We'll wait and see. And when I say I don't know, I have plans in my head, right? But they're all factually dependent. Sometimes, let's see, anybody have kids? Nate, Russell, how old are your kids?
15 months and negative 2 weeks.
Nice. What about you, Ron? How old are your kids? Negative 2 weeks.
8 and 4.
Okay. An 8-year-old probably asks these questions. Is it a boy or a girl?
Girl.
Maybe, maybe not. They ever ask you, like, if you got hit by a car, would you live? Or if you got shot, would you live? Do they ask you stuff like that?
Yeah, there's that kind of like weird off the wall type thing. What would happen if you got shot? Yeah, stuff like that.
Man, my daughter asked me this stuff all the time. Where I was like driving. My son used to ask me too, but he's older now. But they want a black and white answer for something that's very factually dependent, right? They're like, hey, what happens if you get shot? And you go, well, it depends. You know what I mean? It's like, where'd you get shot? What'd you get shot with? What kind of round was it? How far were they? You know, I have a friend of mine, a guy named Rob Disney. He got shot in the face on a 60. So he was on a 60 on a Black Hawk coming in on final. They were doing a rescue and he got shot like to the back of the fucking head right here. And it came out the top side like of his lip, right? So he lived, boom. It like just missed his jaw, went inside, just missed his carotid, came out the front of his face. He's got the gnarliest scar. They continued on the operation, by the way. So the dude got shot in the face and continues, absolute savage. You know, and she just asked me the other day, she's like, if you got shot in the head, would you live? And I go, well, it depends where you get shot. I got a buddy got shot in the face and he lived. Generally speaking, you get shot in the face, you're probably not going to live. Right. And so the same thing is true, is that every situation is factually dependent. What are you going to do? We'll see. Right. So allow yourself to stay in that uncomfort. And that's really what David does here. And it's a good piece that we want to really make sure that we're pulling from that is it's okay to be uncomfortable. If you're going to be a good competitor, a good leader, a good husband, especially as a husband, how many times is there something in your marriage where something's a little uncertain and your wife's going to want a certainty, right? You have to be willing to just shoulder it and go, hey, I know you're concerned about that. We'll figure it out when it happens. Well, what do you mean? And you think that you can reason with her to allow that certainty to be there so she won't be stressed. And the only thing that you can give her in certainty is that you're not stressed. I promise you cannot reason with your mindset to get her to be like you're thinking. And I know, because I probably tried this for 10 years of marriage. I'm like, look, if this happens and this and then this and this, and I'm like running through a sequence of the multitude of things that could happen and what my response would be, and none of them will suffice to make her feel the way that you feel. And so now, you know, I have a different mindset. Like, here is a perfect, for instance, I just at my house, I have a deck, and on the deck, there's like a 12-foot like livestock trough that's like a big circle. It's like a small pool that we took it out, and it basically like just continued being a pain in the butt. It was here from the previous owners. And so we had it kind of drained and covered up. And I was like, hey, I'm going to tear that out and redo this deck before they come on Friday. And I was doing some training all the way through like 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning. And so it's like Wednesday. That means I got Wednesday and Thursday to do it before Friday. And she's like, no, why don't we just, you know, cover it up something else? I'm like, dude, I'm just going to take it out. She's like, how are you going to get that deck done in time? Blah, 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 all these things. And there was no like me giving her an assurance from a factual standpoint. And so I just went, hey, I know that you're stressed. I'm not. It's going to be all right, you know? And she's like, well, I don't believe it. I'm like, it's okay. You don't have to believe it. I love you. And if you're upset, I get it. I'm not worried about it. It's going to get done. Right. And you better believe come Friday morning when that thing's done, right? And my daughter's laughing in the background. You better believe that I do benchmark these things. And I go, hey, remember when I was a big dumb idiot and didn't know what I was talking about? I love you. Case in point, try if you can to remember this the next time something pops up. She won't, but it's still just a good benchmark for her insecurities and fears that will come up. The subsequent actions.
If you do it long enough, she will, bro.
That's right.
You know, because I think, you know, we've been married 34 years this year, and the first 20, I'm trying to prove myself to her that if I say I'm going to do it, freaking, it's getting done. And even now, she's like, you sure you want to do that right now? Right now is the only time to do it. I got to do it right now. So if I don't do it now, I'll put it off, and I got time. I'm just going to freaking do it. Yeah, but I feel, and you know, part of it we figured out, she feels guilty that I'm working my ass off, and sometimes she's not. You know, and she's working to capacity, but I have a lot more capacity. So yeah, just winter over time.
Yeah, I don't think just in this case, it definitely wasn't guilt. That can absolutely be a thing. So that's something to be aware of, is they don't.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that.
Yeah, a wife will want to protect you from discomfort, right?
Yep.
Like they will. But
yeah, well, and there's often stuff underneath. My point being, there's stuff underneath for your wife, and you may not know what it is, and she may not either. And you have to self-discover over time.
Exactly. And so for me, I'm like, no. That'll take me 6 days if I have more than just 2 to get it done. So I'm going to use the fact that I know I got to get it done, and 2 days will work, right? So 2 days it was, 2 days we are. It's good to go. I'll send you guys a picture, right? So it's just a good reminder as a husband, if you want to provide security for her, it's not allowing her to understand your thought process. It's just simply being confident enough in yours to allow her to be upset. And what I'm telling you is, she will always be somewhat stressed and upset. But if you just stop trying to convince her and be like, I understand, I get it, I'm not worried about it, I'm going to get it taken care of. Well, how are you going to, and all those questions pop up, and you just, I understand. And she'll still be upset, but it'll be like early when you do this, it might be an hour, it might be a day. Later, for me now, it's like 5 minutes to Bill's point, right? So I could spend an hour trying to convince her, or I could just stop trying to do that and allow it to be uncomfortable. And that's really what David does here. All right, a little bit more and then we'll pull it. When there was a war again, David went out and fought against the Philistines and defeated them with a great slaughter, so that they fled from him. Man, great word usage. Now there was an evil spirit from the Lord on Saul, and as he was sitting in the house with a spear in his hand, David was playing the harp with his hand. Once again, we're back, right? And Saul tried to pin David to the wall with a spear, but he escaped from Saul's presence, so that he struck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. Okay, something has started to become something. I'm playing the harp again. I went out, I proved myself. David's starting to see the writing on the wall, which is that there is no getting past this guy's insecurities. He just tried to kill me again. And like for us, we kind of read that, but like my man is sitting down playing an instrument, and like looks up and a spear's coming at him and he dodges and goes, okay, it's time to GFO, right? Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him in order to put him to death in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, informed him, saying, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be put to death. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took the household idol and laid it on the bed and put a quilt of goat's hair on its head, covering it with clothing. When Saul sent messengers to David, he said to him, he is sick. Then Saul sent messengers to David, saying, bring him up to me from his bed so that I may put him to death. When the messengers entered, behold, the household idol was on the bed with the quilt of goat's hair on its head. So Saul said to Michal, why have you betrayed me like this and let my enemy go so that he has escaped? And Michal said to Saul, he said to me, let me go. Why should I put you to death? So David fled and escaped and came to Samuel at Ramah, and he informed him of everything that Saul had done to him. And he said, he and Samuel went and stayed at Naioth. But it was reported to Saul, saying, behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah. Then Saul sent messengers to take David. But when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying with Samuel standing and presiding over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. So we'll press on from this next week, but this is kind of neat. We see two interventions happening here. Okay. So one is David is being shrewd and trying to approach the situation best possible. And then there's a situation that seems to rise up that's even beyond David's control, and God intervenes, right? So kind of two things are happening here. David is being tactically intelligent, strategically intelligent, and Saul still pins him into a corner, and God intervenes, right? Because why? Because God has a will and an outcome for David. But there is something that happens here that's kind of a big deal, right? So how is it that David is able to escape? How does it say? They do something. What does she do? This is giving us a first inclination to David's approach. What you got to?
He lets him down or something, or what
She
did it
lets him
say?
down. Yep. And then what happens next?
Sure.
Somebody hook it up. What happens next? Something we have to ask a question about.
Can't scroll through your,
Oh yeah,
I'm trying to scroll through your screen.
that's it. That's it. Right here.
So the
The
household idols. She took the idol.
Okay. So what is a household idol? Is this an idol to Yahweh?
No, this
Mm.
would have been like a pagan idol, I assume.
That's right. So why is this in the house? You see, David does something that's a little different later. Jesus calls for the same. In this time period, and all through the Roman time period, the Romans were like this, the Greeks were like this. They don't think in terms of one God and one God only. They think in terms of as many gods that are on our side, the better, right? And God is very opposed to that. And we see that, right? This is one of the first things that Solomon will do is he will tear down the idols, right? Ultimately, he's going to get swayed. And how does he get swayed? Seemingly the same way that David is swayed here. Why is David allowing an idol in his house? This is like really important when we look at influence and leadership as a husband. Michal comes from an affluent background. She's wealthy. She's the princess. They have idols because they think it's better to have more than to have one. He allows this to be in his house because his strong-willed daughter or strong-willed wife has convinced him such. He doesn't want to maintain that fight with her, right?
He just allows it. You're saying he just allows that to happen and isn't leading in that situation.
100%.
Yeah.
And so from her perspective, do you think that she thinks that she is opposing God? Most likely not. From her perspective, this is a wise choice because more benefit, more luck charms is better than less. David already knows that there is just one God. So already we're getting to see David is an exceptional warrior, but as a husband, he's got a lot of room for improvement, right? And this is very important for men that are warriors. I find a lot that men can be warriors, but they don't want to fight the good fight against their wife. This dude's dodging spears. He's killing thousands of men, but won't handle the confrontation of one woman. Also, instead of just letting him down the window, what do you think would have been the wiser choice? Instead of him going alone, if you read forward, you know what's going to happen, but you probably don't. Cliff notes, she's going to be given off to marriage to somebody else by Saul, right? So his wife here, who he leaves at the place, is going to be taken by another man. And that's going to start a real cascade of problems for David as we press forward. The reality is, and it's easy for me to sharpshoot reading this, but I can tell you confidently that at least the way that my life came to the point of what this moment would have been, Jess is crawling out the window with me. And why do you think he doesn't do that?
I don't know if he I mean it says that he's fond of her and loves her, but does he really?
I think he is, but I think again, he's trying to protect his wife's comfort. This is a dangerous game for men. She's a princess that grew up in a kingdom. She's had nothing but luxury her whole life. He's not willing to drag her through what he knows is coming because he cares about her. He doesn't want her to be that level of uncomfort. And I'm here to tell you, men, that if you're not willing to make your wife step back in luxury or otherwise, then you're really just leaving her behind. And that's what happens with David here. I mean, I watched my mother do this with my father, which is we lived in a shitty place in Atlanta. Then we lived in a nicer place in the suburbs. And then we're going to move to Florida. And I watched him pack my mom up. And we went and lived in a damn trailer park and then lived in an old rundown place. And they worked on that place for years to make it nice, eventually sold it. Now they have an amazing place. But I watched my own mom go from this level of secular to this level of secular. He's like, this is where we're going. And she was along for the ride, right? Now, my mom's kind of an adventurer, so she probably was excited. And she also, my mom grew up in a luxury castle. She grew up with a very successful, my grandmother's very successful in real estate, very nice house on the water, amazing place. But when my grandmother died, my step grandfather stole most of the inheritance from my mom. And my mom went from living in a castle to living in a trailer, right? With 2 kids. Along comes my dad. My dad rescues her out of that situation. Ultimately, she then goes and falls back down in affluency in order to come to that outcome. When Jess and I decided to open the gyms, we just saved all of our money and went from living in a house to living in a 300 square foot room with no air conditioner and no lights inside of the gym and like a storage room. And I knew that that was going to be uncomfortable, but I also watched my dad do it with my mom. And so I was like, oh, well, this is where we're at. The path to where we're going is an uncomfortable one. Are you coming? And David doesn't do that here. And that's what really sets him up for the rest of his life, is going to be tumultuous when it comes to women. And so I froze for a second. And so everything we're going to see that David does that turns out very poorly is because he loves the involved and doesn't want them to experience the discomfort that he experiences, every single one of them. And so my encouragement, men, is that if the people around you love you, drag them through the dirt with you. And if they don't want to go, that's their choice. But I'm asking you to come. I'm going. I believe it's right. And if she won't follow you through the dirt, that's her choice. But it's not loving to remove the stress from them. We think it is, but it's not, because all growth comes from discomfort. If he'd have taken his wife with him, his life would have been drastically different, but he doesn't. It starts with him not wanting her to be afraid of not having the idol. It starts with her not wanting to be discomfort in the path he's about to walk. And also, like, tactically, like right now, if I had to take my wife through, the mountains of North Carolina after a storm or otherwise, I already know that that's going to suck for her far more than it will for me. Too fucking bad. Let's go. It is what it is. And he doesn't do that here. And that turns out very poorly. Thoughts?
I think it almost aligns with what you were saying earlier too, with the uncertainty and being okay with that, and knowing when to invite our wives into that, how much of that to share and how much to just kind of when it's time to share that.
Yeah, because if he was able to let himself down, is it possible she's not strong enough to lower herself down? Sure, but he could have just tied her to whatever he got lowered down on, lowered herself to the ground, and followed thereafter. He's tactically sound. That wouldn't have been hard to figure out, right? What you got, Cam?
I think that concept is also applicable to children. I think that dads do that with their kids a lot. They protect them from, hardships, and then it ends up making them weaker.
100%. you know, we had plenty of hardships growing up, just the multitude of situations. I knew that my kids probably wouldn't have some of the same, you know, multiple environments that my dad in love was willing to take us through. So I made sure to artificially create those. Like I created all kinds of challenges for my kids. Like I would just be, it'd just be a Tuesday and I'd be like, what can I do to make their life suck right now? I swear I do it. I just look around and figure out how to create challenges because that is the path to character growth. You know, of all the things that I've been blessed enough to be able to be a party to in this life that, or, you know, people will clap their hands over, none of those compare to how pleased I am with my son's character, right? My daughter's character, she grows. Nothing, no amount of money, no house, nothing. Who he is, without a doubt, is what I am most proud of in this life. And he did not become that way by me creating a culture of comfort. He became that way because I constantly put just shitty challenges before him as often as possible. What you got, Cam? Cam, you got something?
Oh, my bad. No, that was it. I just always tell my son that because he always asks me, why are you running so much? Why are you doing this? Like planned suffering prepares you for unplanned suffering.
That's
he doesn't
it.
really get the concept at 4 years old, but he will. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, as we're looking at model and application, you're modeling it. You know, you come back home from one of those runs, you might consider like going, hey, come on, let's go outside. All right, you're going to run around the neighborhood, right? And then figure out how far he can go to where it's not bad, and then make him do it again. You know what I mean? And your wife for sure will be like, he
Yeah,
doesn't do that.
I take him with me all the time.
Love it. I love it. You know, help.
Yeah, it's too hot outside.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yep. Hey man, we've been surviving for thousands of years. Every person on this planet, every single one of them is a byproduct of survivors. It's important to remember that. If you are alive right now, somebody survived long enough to procreate. And that means they overcame odds. Every human walking the planet comes from a ancestral line of motherfuckers that made it, right? So every person alive, even if, you know, we live in this society where people have allowed so much comfort that they're massively obese or otherwise, every person here has fucking greatness inside of their genes or they wouldn't be here. What you got, Ron?
How do my question to the group is how do y'all find that balance when you're dealing with daughters?
What you guys got?
My daughter's 4 months old, so I can't answer that yet.
Yeah, that's it. Let's see. Yeah, you're the one with the oldest daughter. I think besides me, I don't think there is any other. What you got, John? How old's Logan?
Yeah, she's 7.
There you go.
She's mature. Yeah. She's I mean, yeah, I think it's just I guess for me too, it's remembering the individual, just really remembering, like Jordan said, the difference between raising godly men and godly women is drastically different. And that's something I knew, but it definitely helped me remember, because no doubt she's probably just as tough as my boys, but then at times she's just way more fragile. So she can still, like, for instance, she can climb a mountain better than my boys. We'll go climb mountains, and I'll still affirm, like, hey, you're a mountain climber, that's what we do. We can do tough stuff, but yet at the same time I still have to be more fragile with who she is as a girl, a woman, because things that I can say I can be a little more sterner in tone of voice, things like that. So I guess, I don't know, it's just really just figuring out that, like Jordan said, what kind of their run around the block looks like. What does that look like for their, how they can handle things, and then you just work with it from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for me, kind of my answer, Ron, and my daughter's sitting in here, so it's transparent what my thoughts are, is that her biggest challenge as an adult woman, if she has a godly man, will be willing to follow him in discomfort, right? A man's challenge is a little different. He, if we look at the curse, and it's actually not a curse because it doesn't say a curse. He only curses the ground and the serpent. But if we look at what God says, the promise is that by the sweat of your brow, all the days of your life, through thick, right through, you will toil through vines and thorns. By the sweat of your brow, you will pull from the ground in order to provide. That's the promise to the man, right? And why? Because that promise will produce character in you. The promise to the woman is that your pain will be greatly increased in childbirth, which will give you a bonding with that child that a man will never have. And the next is that your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. And so the promise there is that how is her character developed? That she has a great longing for her husband and he will have to provide leadership to her, whether she likes it or not. And so as an adult woman, I do not want my wife to simply agree with me. What I do want her to do is be willing to faithfully follow me, even if she doesn't agree. I have a giant, maybe 90% of what is required for that to come about. But ultimately, if I ask her to come down the window and go into the wilderness with me, she has to be willing to do it. And so for me, with my daughter, the way that I approach that is I build up her own confidence through very similar challenges with my son. I mean, I have physically challenged her plenty. Both these kids know exactly how long you can stay in a push-up position, and that is until dad gets tired, right? So it is an infinite amount of time. I've constantly put challenges before her, but in addition to that, there are plenty of times that I will tell her, I want you to go do X, even if she doesn't like it. And that's what's going to happen. Like, hey, something simple, because your daughter's old enough to be able to have a device. Like, hey, I want you to put that device up. Well, how come? They didn't do anything wrong. Because it's what I'm asking you to do. Right. And then if they get a little spicy about it, that's when I come in and I go, hey, I understand that you don't necessarily agree with me. It doesn't matter. I have something in mind that you don't understand. Go do that now, please. Because I have the authority to, whether it's her natural inclination or not, to make sure I'm training her the habits of doing something she doesn't want to do. So while you have the ability to train her where she doesn't have, really, for lack of a better term, and we see that God says this about the leaders of Israel, but when your kids are kids, you are God to your kids. They, in the exact same way that we have with God. My kids have free will to decide how they're going to interact with my will, but I have free will as well. And if they want to interact poorly with my free will, just like God, then I will teach them the lesson that's appropriate. And so while, that's not necessarily the same as an adult wife. An adult wife, a man, kind of it is. A man has his free will. And if she's willing to follow, then she can be his wife. If she's not willing to follow, then she can't. But while your kids are in your household, the advice that I have for fathers with daughters is make her do stuff she doesn't want to do often, so she builds the habit of doing something that she doesn't want to do, so that when she's married to a faithful man, when she doesn't want to do something, it's not the first practice of doing something she hates doing. Does that make sense a little bit? And for me, the way I view it, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes total sense.
Yeah. The way I view it is a dowry. That's the way I view this, is that someday I'm going to hand her off into marriage to a man, and I am going to have a very high requirement of what I expect from him. I cannot hand him a broken product. I cannot hand him a woman who doesn't know how to be faithful, right? If I'm expecting a lot, then I need to hand him a lot. And the thing that every man can benefit the most from is a woman that's willing to speak her mind, willing to oppose him, willing to give him perspective, and through all that, willing to follow him. I don't mean she's happy about it. I don't mean that she's not going to be sitting there quiet and shitty. I don't mean any of that. I just mean she's getting in the car and we're going, right? So, don't think that I'm saying that they're going to just be like, I can't wait to do something I completely disagree with. That sounds like a lot of fun. That's never going to be the case. But is she going to get in the car? If she'll get in the car, then we're going, right? What you guys got? So artificially, how do you set that up? Just make her do a lot of stuff she don't want to do. It's kind of the same thing, and generally physical is a good place to start with that. And then emotional is the next best, Hey, I want you to go do that. They're crying about it. They don't want to do, like, literally crying. It's like, hey, I love you. It's okay if you cry, but I need you to go do that right now, and you just have them do it. Nate Flynn, do you have something, brother?
I do. So I think it was maybe last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, you gave like a fun story about how you had a text come in that was like, hey, can I get a slice of pizza? And you thought it was Slade asking, you're like, no, fuck you, get the pizza yourself. But then when you realized it was Brody doing it, you're like, I got you. I thought that was a really cool, like, hey, we treat people, we don't just treat all people equally all times. We kind of like, we take context into consideration. When it comes to your daughter and teaching her like how to be served by a man versus how to be uncomfortable, do you have like a pendulum swinging kind of
That's a
question
good
that
way
you
to
ask
say it.
yourself to decide which way to go with it?
Yeah, I think that is a great way to say it. It is a very pendulum-like approach. It's variable driven. So I also want my daughter's experience to be that a man will do for her, right? So I don't want to teach her that it's the same, right? So I'm a man. I generally will make my son go do for himself. My wife does a lot for my son because that will be his experience. He does a lot for her as well. My daughter does a ton for me. Like, in that same situation, like, countless times, if she asked me to do something, maybe based upon the totality of the situation leading up that week, I'll tell her to go do it herself. But because of the totality, I want to teach her as well that she should be able to ask and her man should be able to do. Sometimes it's that way and sometimes it's not. It's very factually dependent, pendulum swinging, like you said. It's, for me, it's not an ever, never, and always, because I just don't think life is. So you're just kind of trying to keep a pulse on that to go back and forth based upon what you're seeing. If I start to see that my daughter's acting a little bit arrogant, then it's scorched earth and everything is going to be hard. If I think she's being humble and I think that her approach is there, then I try to emotionally reward her in those situations, right? I also, one of the things that I talk to her is, and she's learned this, when you're asking something of your dad or your brother, there's a certain speech pattern, tone, and a total kind of aura that you're bringing. Don't try that with your mom because it's different. A woman, like, my daughter comes to me with a high level of femininity when she is asking for something, and I train that and I reward that. She comes and she's like, hey daddy, and she's real sweet, because that's what we ask our wives to do. Come to me with femininity when you want something that I don't agree with. With my wife, if she tries to, like, hey mom, my wife is a woman, she'll be like, she'll just see right through it. No, because women talk to women different than the way they should talk to their husband. I talk to men different. I talk to my son different than the way I talk to my daughter. Because if you don't approach each of those and as people, I froze, I'm back. There were some real intent looks happening in that moment. So I was able to be like, if I don't, as Paul says, approach all things or all people, all things to all people, I want to think that's true if I'm going into business. It's true if I'm going into combat. It's true if I'm going into a flea market to buy some stuff. And it's definitely true if I'm talking to my daughter, my wife. There's a different interaction, right? So that's what I'm trying to model, and it's what I'm trying to train. And I have literally told my wife this: hey, I want you to try to con me into getting the outcome you want. And the only way that's going to happen is with femininity, right? Like if you come over and like, I think we should just sell the truck. I'm like, okay, well, it's a great idea, I guess, but we're not doing it. You know, like you're just not coming over to me like a fucking bearded pirate thinking that that's going to work, right? Especially if you're like trying to force your point. That, dude, I am a man. If another man comes and talks to me like that, there's going to be a problem. I'm not going to be somehow different. If you come over and you're like, hey, I know it's probably not a good idea, but I really want to do this or whatever, it's like, dude, I'm really considering it at that point. I'm like, I don't love that idea, but I love you. Let me see if we can figure out how to work that out. And maybe it's there and maybe it's not. Like my wife continually forever like wants a Bronco or a Jeep. She's had two. I've sold them both to buy other stuff, so that didn't go over great, but it was what was necessary, right? So she's like, hey, I saw a Bronco or I saw my dream Bronco over at Travis's lot. My buddy owns a bunch of car dealerships up here. And I was like, well, babe, that's why they call them dreams. You know what I mean? This is like, you know, could we go buy the Bronco? Probably, but it's not an intelligent move for kind of everything that we have going on right now. We'll get to the point where that's important, but it's just, well, where it's relevant. So it's just like, that's one where I'm like, no, you know what I mean? So there's just a variable in there. And that's kind of what I would say, Ron, is just allow the variety to happen there, a lot of different impacts. But I would definitely get her used to hearing no and collecting her emotions from that. Because if when the first time she hears no, and it's an absolute no later, if that's the first time she's had to deal with the emotions of not getting your way, and I know that you do this, your father, just saying it out loud, that if she doesn't regularly know how to hear and be okay with that, then that's the kind of stuff that ultimately leads to divorce, because it just creates bitterness that's hard to overcome. Yeah. Any last thoughts, man? Sweet. Bill, will you pray us out, brother?
I sure will. Let's pray. Father, thanks for this day, for your kindness, for your love and your mercy. Thanks for Jesus. Lord, I pray that as men, we would lead with character, that we would be willing to be disliked because we might say no to people. I pray that you'd help us to be kind and tenderhearted towards others. Help us to move in society in appropriate ways, being kind to those who need to be kind to, being stern to those who don't. Help us to be good, godly leaders. Help us to lead our family well. Help us to serve and model for our wife, but also be very strong in where we're going and how we're going, and invite them to follow us and be with us and be okay if they're frustrated. Same for our kids. Pray that you'd help us to train them for life, that they would go out into life and walk with you, and they would be responsible. They would do hard things and know that life is going to be hard, and they're going to have to do hard things for the rest of their life. That's just the way it is. And I pray that our kids would be a counterculture to this culture. They would be lights to this darkness where kids are really lazy and don't work hard. And so I pray that you help us to figure out how to help them do that, help them to live in a way that's going to change our world. Pray for our businesses. Pray that you protect our character, our hope, our finances, our relationships, our families. Help us to be godly men, and help us not to be passive. Help us not to just give in on areas that we need to stand firm on, and be okay if our wife gets frustrated about it. And help us to love her through that process. Help us not to be unwise, and help us not to pick up sticks and try to force our families to do things, but just to set boundaries and be okay with them, whether they follow us or not. And I pray that, like Jordan has said, that mission first, and then family, and then me. So we put everybody else above us. And so help us to do your work. Lord, we thank you for these times together. Thank you for all you're doing, and pray for each of these men that you'd help them to be great men in the world, warriors for Jesus. And Lord, we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Hey man, the last thought that came to me while Bill was praying is to kind of put this tangibly is we do a lot of modeling service. So I don't want anybody that has sons to think that I don't do for my son. So here's the way I would say, not because I care what you think, but because I don't want you to model poorly. Here's a perfect example. If we're sitting in the living room, we're all sitting on the couch, and my daughter goes, Daddy, will you go grab me something? I'll probably get up and do it. If we're all sitting on the couch and my son says, Dad, will you go grab me something to drink? Let's say he just finished work, right? He's been lifeguarding all day, or he worked out in the yard. He put in some kind of effort of some sort. He hasn't just been chilling watching TV. I'll probably get up and go get that. Outside of that scenario, we're sitting on the couch and he goes, Hey, will you go grab something? I say, no, go get it yourself. If I'm getting up from the couch to go to the kitchen, I generally will say, Hey, does anybody need anything? Because I want to model service as well. And then it'd be like, Hey, will you grab me something to drink and something else? And then lo and behold, in our family, it's like a rotating it's like a rotating slave around here. We always are like just constantly like, I'll get up and go, anybody need anything? And I'll come back with 45 different things that were asked for. So that would be a scenario. Here's another one. He's already sitting in the living room. I'm in the kitchen. I'm grabbing something. He yells out, Hey, Dad, will you grab me a water? For sure. Because I'm already there. It's a situation and it's servants. It's generally whenever I think that the level of comfort has not been earned that I will say no, right? And I realize that can kind of seem like a payment, but it's not. It's me rewarding his effort. I won't reward his comfort, right? And so when I was coming home that day, I was coming home from work or a mission or something. And as I was pulling up in the driveway is when I got the text, will you grab me a piece of pizza and bring it upstairs? And so in my mind, at first, I thought it was my son who was sitting at the house, who I knew didn't work that day. And so the outcome was like, no, get your grown man that's like 2 inches taller than me ass off the couch, walk downstairs and get it yourself, right? My daughter, I was willing to do it for because of the difference I'm training there. Had it been a Saturday and I were downstairs and he were upstairs and he texted me, I would have grabbed it and brought it to him. So it's very factually dependent, but I'm trying to think in terms of where is his mindset when he's asking me this? And if it isn't just this, like, I don't want any discomfort, so I'm going to pass that off, then the answer is no. But we do try to model doing for each other a lot. So that's kind of the balance in there. If I think the mindset, the mens rea of them at the time is absolute laziness, then the answer is no, right? So that's kind of the blend and the balance in there. And sometimes he could have worked all day. I mean, this literally happens. He'd get done, he'd work all day, come home, and it'd be like, Hey, will you grab me something? I'd be like, nope, go get it. Why? Well, because sometimes it'd be like that, dude. Sometimes it's like that. It's an uncomfortable life, Playboy. Go get it yourself. It just is what it is, So that's the balance. That's the blend. That's the rotation. That's the pendulum. All right, brothers. Appreciate you, man. Holla.
Holla.